Hey, how's everybody doing? Today I'm going to be putting in a new alternator into this GMC Sonoma. It's a 99-year model with the 4-cylinder, 5-speed manual, 2-wheel drive. But since it's just the alternator, it should apply to any 4-cylinder. Here's what the engine bay looks like. Unfortunately, the alternator is kind of in a terrible place. It's way down in there. Not entirely sure how we're going to get to it yet. I have seen some people go through the fender well. If you remove this piece here, then it's just right there. So I imagine we'll be going through the fender well because that's not going to be too terribly hard to do. So I'm going to disconnect the battery because we really don't want to be shorting out anything in the charging system. So even if you don't disconnect your battery on most of the stuff, like I'm guilty of, make sure to disconnect it on this. Because if you fry something connecting some of those wires on the alternator, you can fry the charging circuit on your ECU, if not more. So disconnect the battery, we'll get it jacked up on a jack stand, take the wheel off, and go from there. Alright, so I looked a little bit harder and took off this intake manifold, and I think when we remove this fan shroud, we'll be able to get to that from the top side of the motor, so we don't have to take everything else off. But anyways, to take off this whole intake manifold, you'll have to loosen this, unclip that, take the center piece out of these. This just pulls out, this just pulls off because that's this part here. You have to remove that. These pieces are connected like this as one big unit, but it won't come out unless you disconnect this first. If you can't get a screwdriver on there, these are 8mm. You can use a socket, especially on this one right here. It's not really easy to get a screwdriver on. But we took all that off. And then these guys here on the fan shroud are 10mm. There and there. This here was on top of the intake manifold, just pulls out from this hole here. Really easy with a screwdriver, you just get it right here and pop it. But yeah, we'll get those top bolts off. It looks like we may need to take these off too. They look like 10mm, so get that off and see if we can get to the alternator. Alright, so once you get all those 10mm bolts removed, the fan shroud just lifts up out of here pretty easily. I have it sitting over here. Whoa, right there. And it looks like we've got plenty of room to get to the alternator from the top right here. This fan is a little bit annoying, but there's plenty of room to reach around it and get back up in here. So there are 2 bolts that hold this to the brackets. There's one here and one right here. Right there, you guys can see. This one here actually comes in from the back. So we'll have to get a socket back up behind here, which is no big deal. And then, looking at the new alternator here, it's sitting in there something like this. So there should be a plug off the left side and then one bolt on back that we should be able to get once we have it loose from the bracket. We'll get the belt off first though, of course. The tensioner is way down there at the bottom, right here. You'll have to swing it this direction to loosen the belt. This one's on there pretty tight, so I'm going to loosen that up, get the belt off, get these 2 bolts off there. The plug I can feel right here. I'll show you guys the bolt that's on the back and how to get that off. Alright, I've got the alternator up here. This is super easy to unplug from inside. There we go. The clip latches over the top of this, so you can just grab it and pull up, and it comes off pretty easily. One quick thing to note, the alternator is actually held in by 3 bolts. The one here from the front the one up here from the back, and then there was another one right here from the back. This one and this one, I believe, were 13 millimeter, and this one up here was a 15. Oh, I guess I can show you too. Where'd it go? Here's that clip. So you just press up on the top right here and pop it off. This here is also a 13 millimeter. If you're like mine, these two nuts have pretty much all just seized together because they're on so tight, so you'll have to hold the inside one with a wrench of some kind and then twist the outside one with a wrench or socket. But once this wire comes off, this will all be out. But don't worry about taking this off until you get the alternator out of the truck. This wire going to it is fairly long so that you can do it up here. We'll get that taken off. We'll get to put the new one in. Alright, getting the shiny new alternator back in there is pretty much just a reverse of the way it came out. We'll put the wire on here. We'll get it set up into there and get the top bolt in, which, looking at this, is this guy right here. We'll get this top bolt in through the back, get that threaded in there a little bit. We'll get the bolt in the back here. Once those are in fairly good, we'll get this front one in here. Like always, when you're putting bolts in to a piece that needs multiple bolts, just get them in finger tight for the first few threads to make sure all the bolts will get in there nicely. The last thing you want to do is tighten it all up and then have to loosen it again to finagle it and get something else to fit. Anyways, we'll get that all back on and we'll make sure to plug this bad boy in. Then we'll get to putting all this back together. Alright, we got the new alternator down in its new home. Just a reminder, there's a bolt here, a bolt on top here, and one about right here that threads into the back of the alternator. Again, don't forget to plug it back in right here when you get done bolting this up. And then also don't forget to reattach your belt before putting the shrouds back on. So I'm going to put the belt on and we'll get to the next step. Alright, so we got the belts reattached. If you forget which way it goes on, there's a reminder right here. But this fan shroud is the next step. Just get it up in here, up underneath like this. Sorry, trying to do this with one hand. Got to move over a significant amount. In there just like that. Make sure that your holes on the bottom fan shroud line up nicely like that. And we'll just take all of these guys here. And all of this will kind of hold in your radiator up to the front of the truck. So I'll get that bolted down, we'll do the next step. Next step, we've got the fan shroud in here like it's supposed to be, nice and firm. Don't press this down into it yet. Mine actually just fell in there, but don't press down that thing yet. We're going to start by putting this piece here down in the direction it kind of goes. And then we'll put this piece in there and mate that up to it. So this is going to definitely take me 2 hands. So I'm going to get this all put in and then I'll come back and we'll start her up, see how it does. Alright, once you got everything installed, the only thing left to do is to start her up and make sure that alternator is charging. A couple quick things, don't forget to clip this back down. Don't forget your Christmas tree clip down things. Don't forget to plug the sensor back in, tighten down all your hose clamps. There's one there, and this guy here. And got the battery reconnected. Let's start her up. That's all there is to it. Alright, as you can see there, we got the alternator working perfect, just like it's supposed to. It's showing more than 14 volts, whereas previously it was showing about 8. There's a couple other things I got to diagnose on this truck before we get it out the door, but that's how you do an alternator. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.